Okay, looks like we're live. Um, yeah, so I was gonna do what I always do. Oh, this feedback's driving me crazy. I'm not gonna listen to it. I was gonna do what I always do on Sundays, which is break down like an idea or a show or a movie or something. But too many gigs last week, too many gigs this week to really have time for that, and my brain's tired. So instead, I'm going to let's go ahead and switch to. Go. I want to look at some music videos because I want to see how what's involved in breaking these music videos down. Ooh, my flashlight's on. So yeah, it's not going to be technical. It's just going to kind of be by eye. But I figured this is any opportunity to learn kind of thing. So first one, this is Charlie Bliss. The other ones are Skating Polly. If you've ever heard of Skating Polly. Yeah, so this is the Ruby music video from several years ago. These are all like earworms. For some reason, I just can't stop listening to these. So, yeah, let's just go through it. So, first thing is it's in a 4:3 aspect ratio, and I think it's only it maxes out at 480p. But yeah, so did they shoot it in Super 8 or High 8 or whatever, or a handy cam, or did they do it in post? Based on how it looks and based on the fact that it's 480p, I'm pretty sure they did it on a camcorder or some, a dad camera. You can also tell anywhere where there's high contrast, there's fringing, which is where on one side of the contrast line there's one color and on the other side there's another color. So we have like fringing under her chair, purple fringing. That definitely, you could do that in post, like as a colorist, sometimes to sort of sell the look of old tape or old video or even old film. You can set up fringing, but I think it's legit. So it's a stage, and the bit is basically that this sort of interview host is going to show like I think it's a talent show. So I think it's like it's an homage to like American Bandstand in the 50s or the 60s, and they're gonna show some talent show people. So let me see if I can find that. Yeah. So here's the band, and this is actually them, but they look very goofy. So Eva's got her goofy hair. I think that's her brother in the back, and I forget the two guys. I don't know who this. I think these are PA. But the bit is they're playing a band, and it's silly. And it's supposed to be like a folk band, but they don't really sound like a folk band. Yeah, and then there's crowd reactions, which is funny because I think that's also them. I think that's I don't know. It's so blurry, it's kind of hard to tell actually. Now that I'm looking at it. And then there's other talent show people too. So there's the guy with the I'm not sure what that bit is actually. There's also the slapping talent guy, which is funny because I think they're brother and sister. But yeah, so how do they light it? Well, the first thing is it's obviously on a stage, so probably stage lights, probably hanging lights. If it was just an empty warehouse, they could have cheated that, but I have a feeling this was actually on a stage because this looks like a actual stage backdrop. I can't really tell what's behind them. Hard light though, so instead of sort of the common way we do things now, this is really hard because they're so out of focus, I realize. The really common thing now is soft light, like make the light as big and soft as pleasing as possible, sort of wrapping around the face to sort of hide shadows and stuff. This is the opposite. You can see that this was a big hard light, or maybe not even a big hard light, a hard light somewhere. Again, one of those studio lights hanging somewhere. And then even the reverse shot, lots of shadows on the face and lots of hot spots on the face. So again, probably very high, coming down, shadows everywhere. So multiple lights, multiple shadows. And that's the real difference between sort of narrative and like live show or stage show, in my opinion. Is narrative, you kind of want to work with the lights that you have. You kind of want to make things look like as natural. A lot of times in narrative, you want to make them look as natural as possible. I can make myself appear, I realize. So we'll do that. But actually, I'm in a weird spot though. Whatever. Top right. So in narrative, yeah, you usually the logic is usually find where the light already happens and either leave it there or augment it. But in stage shows, it's really mostly getting the performances. And they even, they even went an additional direction in this sort of fake American Bandstand bit that they're doing. So everything is bright. There's not a lot of shadows, but when you see them, they're really harsh. So these are all directional, strong lights, and there's a bunch of them. And I think that's, and yeah, you get, the lights are so bright that just a regular person is going to have a little bit of a sheen based on your camera settings. Yeah, I don't even know if I can add more to this. I think it's just straight up like stage lighting, and that's what you got. And then they did a goofy zoom in, and on the zoom in, I think they actually adjusted it a little bit because it looks like there's a light right on her to sort of smooth out her face a little bit, but you can see there's still a hard shadow. But yeah, I'd say just studio lights for this one. Yeah, there's hard shadows under the chin, depending on where you're standing, and every time there's an audience reaction, there's a weird shadow. Tinfoil hats, that's very funny. So yeah, did it take them a long time to set up the lighting? Based on the fact that they had to set up a stage and an audience and a set, if it took them a day to set up the set, it probably took them that long to set up the lights. But it's not nuanced lighting. It's just very straightforward lighting, which I can appreciate. Having worked on a bunch of stage shows lately, I'm into it. There's a time and a place, and when you want to see the performer, you want to be able to see the performer. That's the whole thing. If you're doing a dramatic, nuanced character thing where this tight shot is the whole movie, that's different, and you want to make sure that your DP and your lighting technicians, your gaffer and everybody are making sure they're setting the tone correctly. But when you're doing a stage show, light the performer. And if there's weird shadows, as long as the weird shadows aren't on the performer, sells. I think it sells. Moving on. Fun song. I really enjoy this song, Ruby. Young Enough. Young Enough is a completely different kind of everything from Charlie Bliss. I won't do there's a clock bit, but I won't do the clock bit. I think it's stop motion. I don't want to play it because I don't want to get copyright struck. But it's, yeah. So a couple things that are happening right away that I'm seeing. The first thing is there's just the sheer amount of grain that's on everything. So this was probably shot Super 16 or Super 8. You can do this in post, in the color grade, or in the, in just post basically. I think the big appeal right now with shooting on Super 8 or Super 16 is a lot of people, almost everybody shoots digital because it's just more convenient now. And so if you have somebody whose thing is shooting on film, that can sort of define you. If you're a director or a cinematographer who specializes in shooting on film, especially on these older film styles, which is Super 8, Super 16, or even 1-inch, sure. From a practical point of view, the rise of the digital age has just opened up a lot more control and opportunity, whereas if you shoot on film, you're going to get what you get. And so as long as the director of photography really understands lighting and really understands the film that he's shooting on, you're probably okay, but what you're going to get is what you get. And this is that. So they're outside in daylight, they're in smoke, which is pretty nice. But they're outside in the daylight, which is where Super 16 and Super 8 really lives, because it's not a very it's a low ISO film. It's a low ASA film. It doesn't take in a lot of light very efficiently. So, and because the actual like capture period is so small, or capture area is so small, you have the negative effects of that. So if they shot this on Super 35, which is sort of cinema standard, it wouldn't be this grainy, but it would also probably have more light absorption, and so you don't have to be in bright direct sunlight. But they did something really interesting too. So it becomes night. It sort of like time goes by, and then they start shooting at night, And I think they made some really interesting choices. So what's happening is they're still shooting on, I'm pretty sure it's Super 16. How high does this resolution go? Yeah, it just goes to that. So that's why you're seeing all this grain. So they're using probably the fastest ASA Super 16 film they can get, like 1600 or 3200. I don't even know what they go up to. So pretty, sensitive film. But when you get pretty sensitive film, you get a lot of grain. And even then, when things are in shadow, they're just completely lost, which is, so what they did was they literally, it looks like either above the camera or somebody, next to the camera is holding a pretty bright light right on these people. And based on, at least, I can't tell if it's, let me try to find a shot that, so this is all dusk. So this actually might not be augmented. That might not have been augmented. That just might be the sunset over there to the right. Because, golden hour, blue hour, all those sun low in the sky stuff is sort of the sweet spot for filming. That's what it is. And so even non-sensitive films like Super 16 films, you can kind of get away with it, especially if you side light people. So there's definition. So there's a brighter side on one side and a darker side on the other side. But if you look stuff that's actually in shadow, it's just gone. But I think, yeah, so it looks like it's a hard light, not a soft light. I was thinking it would be like a soft, like a China ball or a globe. But now that I'm looking at it, the definition under her chin, I'm thinking, yeah, you know what? I think it's probably a hard light, and there's a good catch light in her eyes. So it's probably like a, I don't know what, some kind of sourcey light, like a light bulb or a regular can light. So probably not a globe, probably not, a big sheet of diffusion. Probably not that, because they probably wanted as much light on the performers as possible, because it gets so dark. So again, this would be earlier than this, probably, because they're sort of trying to survive in the dusk. And so this is a really good one. It's backlit, so it's basically dusk. It's a little bit before dusk. The sun's already down, and then they have a light on the performers to augment it. They might have reflected it, but I'm pretty sure there's not enough light, and the angle would have been really tough to reflect it. So this is probably that same light that they were using a minute ago. But yeah, these are all these are like just dusk, just natural light stuff to a point. So these are all dusk, and then you get to a point where they get bright again. So it looks like there might be a light here. Actually, you know what? This is still the sunset. But if you get to here, this is the light. So the sun has gone down, and I think this is when it goes into like a montage. Again, I don't want to play it because I don't want to get in actual trouble. But I do like this band. It just kind of seems yucky that I would, take advantage of this band. And then this is the daytime again. And I think there's like a time skip. And so now we're in daytime, now we're in direct light. The depth of field, I don't know if you can tell, is a lot deeper because they had to stop down. So this is direct sunlight on one side, and then just the natural shadow on the other side of the face. But you can still see the grain. It's still a very grainy thing, because I think it seems like they use the same kind of film stock for everything. Again, the only difference if they had to do this digitally is you got to find a camera that shoots in Super 8, or you do the math to figure out what the Super 8 frame is, or Super 16 frame is on your digital camera, and then just add in post if you need, or add in a grain in post if you need to. But based on the coloring, it looks like this, just based on how consistent the coloring of everything is. I'm fairly certain this was shot on film, and they just went for it. Yeah. So it's very interesting. I like this music video. It's a very interesting music video because it's doing a lot, but they really liked the grain. And usually, so there's grain in everything, but you notice the grain in the white, because traditionally, especially with digital stuff, you don't see grain in the light part of the image. You just see noise in the dark part of the image. That's the digital thing. But in film stocks, there's grain everywhere, and so if there's sort of low contrast, so like her jumpsuit is basically just white, so it's fairly low contrast, you can really see the grain. And if I played it a little bit, you can see the grain jumping around. Yeah, YouTube compression basically ruined it, but yeah, so it's a, it's a thing. So basically they used the available light that they had. Is it gonna let me do it? Come on. There we go. So that's the most direct sunlight. So that's, it's either an hour after sunrise or it's an hour before sunset. Based on the fact that this whole thing basically takes place at night, this is probably the very last thing they shot, unless they shot it the next morning. She does look a little bit cooked, so maybe they worked yesterday and today is day 2. But yeah, so using available light and then augmenting it when you have to, when it's so dark that you can't see anything, because again, at the end of the day, you need to catch the performances. And so she is obviously much too bright for the context of what she's in, but you got the performance, and that's the most important thing. So into it, very into it. And that was my, love letter to Charlie Bliss. Here's a super shallow depth of field, and you can see the grain kind of went away. So this might be a different situation, or YouTube just broke the grain, but very shallow depth of field, very close and very bright. And it looks like the light's coming from directly left, because you would normally have a Rembrandt light for the nose, and it's like a Rembrandt light for her eyebrow. So interesting. Yeah, the logic of shooting inside versus outside. I'm a colorist, so I like the control aspect of it. And so if you're shooting outside, it's much harder to control the sun than it is to control lights, because the sun moves around, clouds, everything changes colors, that kind of thing. But as long as you're committed to it, as long as you sort of know what you're up against and how to work with it, it's not a huge deal. The difference is if you just use lights, you either have to find a way to get rid of the sun, which outside can be very tricky. You usually have to put up a bunch of diffusion or something to block it, and then add in lights. If you're indoors, you only have lights anyway, and so you either fake or use sunlight coming in through the windows as a starting point, or you just ignore the sunlight aspect of it all and just use lights. A very common sort of commercial interview setup right now is light coming in through the window and then daylight light coming in, sort of making the appearance of like a second sun, to sort of overpower the sun outside. I think, I don't know if I explained that correctly, but the point is, a lot of interviews now have sort of regular colored daylight coming through the windows, and then it looks like people are daylight lit in this environment. And the way to do that is have really bright lights to overpower the sun, which can be done. The reason I sort of shy away from it at all whenever possible is because really bright lights, especially lights that are so bright that they can overpower daylight coming in, are really hard on people looking that into the light. So the actors, but even the makeup artists, anybody that has to look into those lights for long periods of time, it's brutal. So I like to shy away from that. If somebody still asks for daylight coming in through the window to get overpowered, I'll usually try to knock down the daylight with neutral density or some other, shading opportunity outside the window, usually, to minimize how bright it has to be inside, because you don't want your actors and your performers squinting. That's, as someone with blue eyes, looking the direction of the sun sucks, and I'm a squinter, and that people don't like squinting, and then you get crow's feet when you actually look at the image, and actors like to look pretty. So anyway, that was Charlie Bliss. I like Charlie Bliss, big fan. This is Skating Poly Protective Boy, and it's completely different. This is the very first thing you see. So I believe this is a light. It's either a light or it's an ornament that's being lit by something, but it's green and it's got like a green edge. So again, this could be a situation where they shot on film. But when you actually go into it, let's see if we can get, I forget, I've already forgotten her name. she looks green. So these are the not the kind of skin tones you want. Her eyes are actually look like the skin tone is right, but her face is kind of sort of a sickly green. But then her red hair is fine. So it's a whole thing. So they've gone for the sort of a green universe. But if you look at the lights around her, I'm not even sure what that is. But you have sort of practical lights that are just they're in this house. That's the whole bit. Is they're in like her family's house, because I think these are sisters. These two girls are, I think they're half sisters. So that's the basement, but this is the kitchen, and that's the basement again. This is them on the couch. So a couple things. I guess that's a light behind a poster. Oh, you know, it's a light into a picture. That's a light down here shooting into a picture. So couple things going on. It's sort of the house of it all, but they're going for a practical look. Oh, I realized I hid the picture. I can show you the picture. There you go. There's the picture. Yeah, there's a picture with a hot light sort of from the ground, which from a filmmaking standpoint doesn't make sense, but from a practical standpoint, doing a light from above isn't worth it, especially for the vibe they're going for. I totally get why it came from below. So we'll go back to the comp. Actually, I can fix this comp too. Yep, there we go. Okay, so a couple things happening. All the practicals are on. I said that word, practicals. Okay. This looks like a practical too that they turned off right there. Oh, it's not capturing the cursor, is it? I'm a disaster today. Let's see here. Hold on. That's embarrassing. Okay, so light in the corner, bouncing off thing, and then there's also, this looks like a practical that they turned off because it probably would have been too distracting, especially because it's going sort of bright, dark, bright, dark, bright, and then dark, and then kind of a bright. So they kind of did the zebra thing, which is either they did it by accident or they have a cinematographer who actually studies, because that's a very popular thing to do these days. And then they, to bring up the levels on her, to bring up the exposure on her, it's a light. It looks like it's a hard light based on how hard the shadow is on her face, and it's probably right off camera. I'm thinking over to the right here, because I'm not getting cursor either. I'm embarrassing myself. Let me see here. Capture cursor. Yeah, okay. It says I'm capturing the cursor. I don't know. I can't tell if you guys can see this. Anyway, the exposure on her, it seems to be a light off to the right a little bit, right off camera, maybe a little bit high because you can see it going under her chin a little bit. Which again, if you're gonna go high, because if you go low, it kind of goes up the nose, and it's a whole thing, and you get sort of. For me, especially like right now, for instance, because I'm tired, I have the really deep circles under my eyes. If they went any lower than what they were, she would probably have circles under her eyes. That's her sibling or her cousin. Yeah, that's what's going on with her. So yeah, straight on green, maybe shot on film. Again, it looks like the light might actually just be on the camera based on the catch lights in her eyes, because it's right on her. Yeah, I think it actually is. It might be just a light on camera. So they basically just turned on the lights they thought were relevant. This might have been a cheat for looking at a TV. This could be a fake TV. Although the coloring wouldn't make sense, because usually you think of TV as blue, and this is obviously not blue. This is more of a green, but yeah, so like a red environment. So they probably white balanced. I don't even know what they white balanced to make that red. I'm not sure what they did. It could be that it's on film stock and it's like daylight film stock, because that would make things look really amber. And so they picked a more daylight or a more fluorescent on her. Yeah, but yeah, I'd buy that. I'd buy that it's daylight balanced, because his skin tones look fine under this amber light. She just looks very green because the light that's hitting him is this light that's above her. She's got the on-camera light, so it's probably, now that I'm thinking about it, it's probably an LED panel, because this was a couple years ago, right? 6 years ago. So this is probably one of those square, like 50 cell or 100 cell LED panels that were a little bit green, but who cares? Like, I totally buy it. As far as a natural look, as far as a pleasing look, honestly, the skin tones and everything behind them are much more contemporary. If you look at a lot of shows now, like the White Lotus, for instance, is a good one. Everything is in this world. Everything is in this amber world, and part of that is because amber, our skin tones exist in amber, so the skin tones look correct, whereas she looks a little green. Where's that under the shoes thing? That's my favorite shot, is under the shoes. We're not gonna find it, are we? Here we go. Yeah, so she does this whole under the shoes thing, and again, this is very much the light is right on her, and so you get hard shadows. So this is a way to do it, you know. So like New Girl, the show New Girl, if you say what you want about it, you know, the Zooey Deschanel of it all. I was a big fan until it sort of fell apart as a show, but one thing New Girl did that regular shows, even multi-camera shows, didn't really do is they would light the front side of the face instead of the back side. They would shoot and light the same side, basically. The film school would tell you that if the light is coming from over here on the left, which it kind of is, I mean, it's coming right off the camera, you want to shoot the shadow side. But what New Girl did is it lit the whole face, and so everybody got the pleasing sort of like performance face instead of the sort of the grungy face. And so they're kind of doing that here with the direct on lighting. It does help smooth out wrinkles too. Not that she has wrinkles because she's a kid, but yeah, it's this direct lighting. It's very not popular right now, which I feel frustrated about. This is much more true to life, where she's in shadow and she's getting light from her far right. That's more true to life now, but this direct on light, I'm a big fan of. I wish more sitcoms, especially having watched New Girl, would do this direct on light instead of the sort of the shadow side, because the shadow side is fine, but it's not for everything. Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at with this music video. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. It's just they're having like a house party or a hangout, and then her and her sister go down and jam out. I think is the vibe. Yeah, very hard lighting, very direct lighting, and they used because they're inside, and although this light is powerful when she's close to it, you can see how fast it falls off because it's not even hitting these two people. And then, you know, so even when it's pushed, it only makes it to like the thermostat here down the hallway. So they're using the rest of the ambient light to sort of catch the rest of it. And it's not, the ambient light doesn't match the sort of green LED look that she's dealing with, but who cares? This is, you know, it is what it is. This kind of gives me like a Malcolm in the Middle vibe, in that she's telling the story, she's the center of the story, everything else is sort of the background. At least that's how I took it. So moving on. Last one from Skating Polly. I really like this music video, but it's a real earworm of a video. Louder in Outer Space. It like bounces back and forth between this really like toned down song to like basically shouting. It's like a couple seconds of this, couple seconds of this, couple seconds of this, couple seconds of this. But if you look, especially at the beginning, when you have the sister singing, the older sister, she is basically blurry. Like the whole thing is incredibly blurry. And it's a film schooly thing, but they took it so much further. So again, it's kind of like the Charlie Bliss one that I was talking about at the beginning, where it's on a stage, it's a performance, it's the whole thing. I can move my face out of the way there we go. But if you look, everything is blurry, and then everything that's brighter than a certain thing has a crazy hue on it. And the way you would do that today digitally, because, you know, the big cliche is digital sensors are really sharp, is you would put a blur filter on it, like a Pro Mist or Black Pro Mist or a Hollywood Black Magic filter, you know, all those different filters. The amount of hue coming off of these, if you were to do it in camera, I'd say all of my mist filters combined, like I have a quarter, I have an eighth, and I think I have a 1 Pro Mist or Black Pro Mist. I think you'd have to use all of them, and you would still have to have this like orb up here is from a light coming in above. So probably above him, or maybe even behind this curtain, there's a hard light going right into camera to sort of blur everything out. It could have been so crazy because there's different ways to make this blur effect. It could have been they put white pantyhose over the lens. Like it's that level of blur. Again, I don't think they did this. I don't think they did this digitally, although you could. It's very easy to do it digitally. It would be a little tricky because you would have to isolate things of a certain brightness to make them glow out this way. But if you've used DaVinci Resolve, if you use color grading, it's not that tricky. It can be done quite easily. If I had thought about it, I would have actually shown that, but I didn't. Let me move my picture because it's just in the way everywhere I go. There we go. How about that? Okay, so yeah, so very straightforward again. Stage show, so hard lights coming from the stage side. They're not as high as the Charlie Bliss ones because if you look at her eye, they're almost right in the middle, so they're kind of camera height, especially for the close-ups. So I'd say like right over camera or right off to the camera right, because again, when you're the same as the New Girl thing, when you're close and you're right on them, you flatten everything out and then you get a really defined chin line, which is very pleasing. This is not how film school would teach you to do it at all. So it's very blurry, it's very lo-fi. If I had to guess, I'd say they probably shot it on film, but based on the fact that there's no grain really, or that could be YouTube's fault, or that could be the fact that it's a really, really, really bright stage, and that also helps with the blurring and the hewing and all the separation. There's all the, like, every time there's a hard light, there's a little bit of again, I forgot the name of the term already, but the separation where it goes green or purple on one side and it goes a different color on the other side. Visual artifacts. I used it at the beginning of this live stream and I've already forgotten what it's called. Anyway, I'm thinking it's a combination of a few things, and I think they probably shot it on film because, once again, I think the skin tones are exactly consistent, and you only get that if you're shooting on film, because otherwise just the environment when you're shooting digitally is different enough that when you go to color grade, you got to really pay attention. It also is a thing where the lights keep going up and they flash in this show. Let me see if I can find it. Like every so often they get to a bit and then the lights flash really hard, so that could be part of it too. There we go. That's a comp. That's hilarious. That's so it reminds me of like the 70s when you would do portraits and you would have the picture of the person, then you have like a semi-translucent picture in one corner, in the other corner. That's what they're doing there. That's really funny to me. It makes me laugh. So yeah, again, these are not the kind of filmmaking styles you'd see today. And I think the number one thing that I'm noticing, other than the fact that it seems like they all probably shot on film, is it's not sharp. And does that detract from the experience? Because especially if you look at like TV right now, everything is razor sharp. To what end? To what end? And this is a colorist saying that. This is a colorist saying to what end? It's nice to have something that's, you know, high resolution, high color depth, high detail, high sharpness sometimes. But I think this image is at least as beautiful as any image today of a singer at the microphone. I didn't even realize she's wearing a tiara. That's funny. It's sparkling. So it's all context. And unless you're doing news or sports where you need absolute sharpness, absolute detail, resolution might actually help in that situation. Most of the time, resolution is your enemy, because resolution makes anybody look old, because it brings out, like, even my webcam is like artificially sharpening. It doesn't help that it's a very dark room, and so it's sort of having to figure it out. But I didn't realize my face was this pitted even with this beard, but because of how, you know, the digital signal is converted, I would have to go in, I would have to take this image and I would have to lower the sharpening or lower the blur, or, you know, grab my skin tones and lower the detail, the mid-tone detail. That's a DaVinci Resolve setting. So all these kind of things. Whereas this image right here, it's good. I mean, I think it's actually extremely sharp, because you can see the definition of her eyes. You can see the definition of the shadow. You can even see texture in her hair. It just has a light blowing out the front of the lens. Yeah, very interesting stylized choice. So Do I have anything else to say about this? Yeah, this one was, it looks like there is at least one, but probably a grid of traditional concert style lights coming down on them at a 45-degree angle harsh. You can see that under their chins. And it's bouncing really hard off the balloon. So it might just be one. Based on the fact that I'm only seeing the one up front, it could just be one really strong light, very sourcey light, looks like. And then the second sheen is this light up here that's either directly above the drummer or it's further back, but it's basically, I think if the camera tilts it up another like 10 degrees, it would be looking right into the camera. But because it's not, because it's at an angle, it's making all these, lens artifacts. My only uncomfortability when you're shooting light right into the lens is, in the same way you don't want to point your camera at the sun for too long because it'll hurt the sensor. It probably didn't do anything, but I would be wary. I'd be between takes covering the lens or adjusting the flag on the front of the matte box to try to knock out the flare, because that is a lot of light hitting a sensor, and yeah, you don't know. I'd be a little worried about it. I always get wary when somebody's like, oh, just leave it on, and there's like a spotlight going right into down the barrel of the lens. It's like, can we turn the camera away, or can we turn the spotlight down? Like, it just, I fear that might hurt the sensor. So, but if they shot it digitally, or if they shot it on film, then probably didn't matter. But so yeah, I don't know what my thesis for this was, other than I've been listening to this music and I've been enjoying it, and I thought I'd pay a little respect to these two bands, Skating Polly and Charlie Bliss, because I like them and I like their music videos. I think they're fun. I think they're, they have, Skating Polly has a ton of music videos because they've been busy, but very abstract music videos, Ruby and Ladder in Outer Space, and then also some, we got an outside one, and we got like the most lo-fi indoor one you could possibly come up with, but it's lit. I think that's the difference, is usually when you see lo-fi, this is what you're seeing, but because they lit it, you can actually see her. So that's what it was. Was this valuable to anybody? I don't know. My brain is melting, and I got 4 consecutive hard days coming up. So this is what I could offer. So like, share, subscribe. Catch you next time. It's going to be a thin week of video output for me. So, but based on the algorithm, I don't know that that's going to affect me at all. So catch you next time.